If you didn't know, Suzanne Collins, the author of the wildly popular Hunger Games trilogy that basically spawned an entire subgenre, recently released a prequel book. This is it: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. 2 out of 5. Before I get started, I want to clarify that there will be no spoilers at all in this. Obviously, I say at all, but any time you're talking about a book or a movie and you haven't seen it yet, some things might get spoiled just because you can put 2 and 2 together if you think critically about some things that I say, but nothing I say will explicitly give away plot points. If you're interested in reading the book, I recommend checking this video out. If you're not going to check it out, I'm also going to make a video basically just summarizing the whole plot, giving you a rundown on what happened in this book. So when I review this book, I'm not going to go into like world issues or any kind of inconsistencies unless it actually affects the plot. I don't remember much from the Hunger Games trilogy, at least not the written form of it, so I don't think it's really fair to criticize those things, and that really doesn't matter to me at all. I can suspend disbelief to a considerable degree. In fact, what I can say about it is that the world building was actually pretty sound. It didn't distract from the story at all at any point. I didn't really have any issues with that. In fact, when I first heard that this book was being made, a book about President Snow, the overarching protagonist of the Hunger Games trilogy, who was all kinds of ists, I was a little concerned. I thought that it would be problematic in a way, but honestly, it wasn't that problematic. The only thing that was an issue, let me put it this way. Back in my college days, like a year ago, there was a guy in my screenwriting class. We were supposed to be writing feature-length screenplays, and this guy very rarely showed up to class. He ended up turning in his first draft very late, and we finally gave him kind of a review of it, went over it with him as a class, and the protagonist just wasn't sympathetic at all, which is a big problem in any story that you can tell. You have to make us cheer for the protagonist or else there's no functional story. A couple weeks later, when he arrived at class again, he told us that he had fixed his problem with the protagonist. He said, "I made him gay." This guy believed that just making a character gay would make him sympathetic. That's problematic. Suzanne Collins kind of does something a little similar in this one, where I think she asked herself, how do I make this classist, rich megalomaniac into some kind of redeemable or at least relatable character? So she just took away his money and made him poor. I don't really know how to put to words, that's what you love to hear in your YouTube videos. I don't know how to put into words that doesn't make a character sympathetic and it's very demeaning. It's kind of detached from reality, honestly. Just making a rich person poor all of a sudden doesn't make them like me. They were rich and now they're not. There's a whole step in there that I'm not familiar with. Another major issue I took with this book is that it was told from a third-person omniscient perspective. We were constantly in, his name is Coriolanus. I don't really know how to say his name, and I will likely say it differently every time. I got to a point where I was just reading it as Cornelius, and eventually that got shortened to Corny. So I'll probably call him Corny for the rest of the video. Or Snow. So Corny, his thoughts are portrayed in the writing, and it's actually really frustrating because the stuff you need to know in order for him to have any sort of arc just doesn't appear. For the first 200 pages of the book, we don't even know how he feels about the Hunger Games, which at this point had been going on for 10 years. Everyone around him seems to be very explicitly and expositorily explaining that they feel a certain way about the Hunger Games. Some of them think it's a good thing, a necessary evil. Some of them think that it's just evil and it's worthless and it doesn't actually do anything for anyone. Both of these, I was gonna say being fair sides, but no, they're not. They're not fair sides, and we know that as the reader. But Snow never really expresses how he feels about things. He kind of goes into the necessary evil side, but his actions speak 100% of a different stance. I, like a lot of people when I first heard that this book was being written, was very confused as to whether Snow was going to be redeemable, whether he would have a positive arc or a negative arc, but he doesn't seem to have any arc. He doesn't believe in anything at the beginning, and by the end he kind of believes in bad things, but we don't even really get to see that. Like some other, I would never bash an entire demographic of literature. I think that young adult literature absolutely has its place, and I will talk more about that in another video because I feel like every single booktuber has to at some point talk about young adult literature. But a common issue in a lot of those books, the romance is bad. It's really underexplored. I feel like authors need to understand romantic situations don't mean romance. That's what this book is. We just constantly have reaffirmation that they're in love, and we don't really see any chemistry between them. We don't really see any connection. I will say, however, the romance does drive the plot, which is pretty good. I think that in most young adult literature, the romance is completely secondary, just like a B story. But in this, it actually does drive the plot for the second half of the book. And that makes it a little more organic to the story, even if I can't believe that the characters would fall in love. There was only a handful of characters that Collins played with in this book, and honestly, it worked for the better because they were all pretty well explored, except for the character that we experienced the story from, which is obnoxious. But some of the side characters do feel very well established as to who they are and what they stand for. That being said, I think this book would have benefited greatly from a split perspective. It could have either been divided up into the 3 sections of the book, the 3 parts, or chapter by chapter it could have changed between the 3 main characters being Coriolanus, or Corny as I know him down at the schoolyard, Lucy Gray, or Sejanus. I think that it would have been a lot more impactful to tell the story from each of their perspectives, because sometimes it just kind of felt like we were getting a play-by-play of things that were happening from Snow, because he wasn't directly involved in what was happening. One more thing that I want to say, I'll put a timestamp at this point so you can skip past it. It's not a spoiler, it's just something that happens in the first quarter of the book that I guess you wouldn't know if you hadn't read the book, but it's pretty obvious considering it happens in the other trilogy. Anyway, if you don't want to know anything going into it, please skip ahead at this part. I'll put a timestamp or something that you can just go right past it. Thanks for sticking around if you did. Basically, at the beginning, they have to do these proposals as to how to make the Hunger Games more interesting, how to get more people to watch it. One of the pitches is for sponsorship, which we see a lot of and is actually an integral part of the Hunger Games in the future, I guess I could say. That just means that they can, give them supplies while they're in the Hunger Games. The mentors can do that. My question about this book, that's a big issue, and the only logic thing that I really took big issue with, what did the mentors do before sponsorship became a thing? The mentorship program was already in action, and they basically didn't have any opportunity to talk with the tributes beforehand until Snow started breaking some rules. It was just really, really pointless before Snow introduced the idea of sponsorship. Before then, they would have just shown up and interviewed them for 10 minutes while a Caesar Flickerman ancestor interviews them as well. It was almost entirely pointless for mentors to be a thing, and I don't think that anyone told Collins that. Overall, the book was an okay addition to the Hunger Games trilogy. It didn't ruin anything, it didn't harm anything. It wasn't as problematic as I thought. I was fully going into this expecting it to be very apologetic to the 1% or the Capitol in these books. But it didn't really do that, but it also didn't explore why someone would be for those things. I think that would have made a much more interesting story. I think overall this book just felt like it was pointless. I didn't learn anything new about the world, I guess. The only really interesting thing was watching the Hunger Games come together as we have come to know them. That was really cool, although it is a little unbelievable that it all came together in a single year, but I didn't really take issue with that overall. The writing was fine, it's young adult level, it's not anything that's going to go down as
literature.
Yeah, I'd stick with a 2 out of 5. If you're a real die-hard Hunger Games fan, you've probably already picked it up, you're probably already reading it. It's worth reading if you are a Hunger Games fan, but if you haven't read the books in a long time, it's not worth going out to pick it up. I might do a more in-depth look into how I felt about it in a few days. I'm a little burnt out. I read it in about 24 hours. not all at once. I'm not that slow of a reader. And so it's just kind of like my brain is a little overloaded right now with all the information from it. So I'll probably come back to it eventually and talk more about it. Maybe I'll reread the other books too and see how it fits in with them. But overall, it just wasn't worth getting excited about. It wasn't the fourth Hunger Games book. Not that the original three were that great to begin with. Anyway, if you like this video, please give it a like and leave a comment telling me what you thought about the book. Please subscribe to my channel for more reviews like this. I'll try to be uploading pretty consistently over the next couple weeks while I kind of buff up my channel. So please subscribe, stick around, get to know me. I don't know what those videos are gonna be about. They aren't even all gonna be about books. So if you don't like books, but you like Hunger Games, sometimes I just start a sentence and I don't know where it's gonna go. And that was one of those times. If you don't plan on reading this book, or at least don't plan on reading it for a very long time, and you kind of wanna watch a little more of a comedic take on it, I am going to be posting another video to my channel where I just go over the plot in depth. Not in depth, but like I just kind of run through it with you. Hopefully it'll be entertaining. Please avoid that though if you don't want spoilers, because it's literally only going to be spoilers. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Love you guys. See you later.